All right. So, Jeff and Sahar, founders of the Integrity Institute, woo, they come with a wealth of information from the platforms and stand as perfect examples of what it means to do just that, build bridges and community that previously didn't exist in the space. So one more round of applause. We'll give the stage to them.
Yo. Are you ready for some misinformation? Let's create some lies. Nope. Okay, so this is the misinformation, but also kind of anti-misinformation village. Hi, everyone. I'm Sahar. This is Jeff.
Hi.
So we are going, we were asked to talk for a while, and we'll do that. But also, raise your hand if you're like half awake or less than half awake. Beautiful. So just to get our blood pumping and like you maybe like awake a little bit more so you can pay attention to us, please stand up, look to your left, look to your right. After a year here at Misinformation University, only 2 of you will be let's just take a minute. Introduce yourself to someone next to you. Maybe a thing of introduction could be a question you have on your mind or a thing you want to say. You know, shake them by the hand if they're into it, and then we'll begin. We've hit the halfway mark. Start wrapping it up. It is time. Please sit down. Yes, sit down now. Yeah. So what should have happened just now is that you had a fascinating conversation, too quick. You can't wait to get back to it. Your blood is pumping. Have you made a new friend? Take all that extra talking energy, all that extra excited energy, and bring it our way. Pay attention to us now. Thank you. And now we can begin. Hi, Jeff. Who are we? What's going on?
Yo, hey, I don't know, we can do quick background and introductions on ourselves. So, hey everyone, I'm Jeff Allen. I'm the co-founder at the Integrity Institute along with Sahar. I act as Chief Research Officer there. So a little bit of background on me. In the long ago, I was actually in the very different world of academia and physics. Left physics in 2013. Was trying to figure out what else I wanted to do in the world, and it was sort of when this whole data science thing was becoming real and becoming popular. So a handful of us jumped over into the data science world. My first job in tech was at about.com, which is a search engine focused publisher. So basically just writing online articles, trying to get traffic from the platforms. My job as a data scientist there was actually to reverse engineer Google search and figure out what are some of the easiest things that about.com could change in order to get more traffic from Google search. So some fun stories there. We ran weird experiments like how many words of an article do you have to change in order for Google search to consider your article updated and thus give it more traffic as being fresh. At the time, this was like 2014, so no idea if it's relevant, but turned out to be 30% of the article, right? So if you changed over 30% of the words, Google search was like, cool, this article is now fresh and updated and we'll send it more traffic. If you change less than 30% of the words, Google search was like, this article has not really been updated, actually. So it was a lot of just like seeing the incentives that platforms create for publishers from external stakeholders, right? It's like Google search has an algorithm. What is that algorithm telling publishers to do? What is it incentivizing them to do? After doing that for a few years, I decided maybe it would be more interesting, instead of reverse engineering platforms, to go work for a platform. So I joined Facebook in early 2016. Great time to go join Facebook. I started out on a product team there, so like local search, which was, trying to build out the search for people looking for restaurants and bars and all that kind of fun stuff on Facebook. But then obviously after 2017, after the Russian IRA scandal, after the Cambridge Analytica scandals, jumped over to some integrity teams. So I started out on Pages Integrity, which was literally formed after the Russian IRA to figure out how many people had actually seen Russian disinformation on the platform through that. But then broadened out to cleaning up a lot of the bad actors that had sort of been using Pages very successfully to reach audiences around the world. After doing that for about a year, jumped over to Instagram, and I was working on an integrity team at Instagram that was worried about harmful content in their recommendation surfaces. So this would be content on the Explore tab, content on hashtags. I did that for almost a year and then decided to leave Facebook overall. So I left at the end of 2019. I jumped into campaigns a little bit. So I actually went to work at the counter disinformation team for the DNC, which is like the Democratic Party in the US, for the 2020 cycle. So in the beginning, that was a lot of helping state parties prepare for their primary elections, which in the beginning was fine. And then COVID hit, and it was like, how do we prepare for the online misinformation space when election rules are changing, 2 days before the primary election? Lots of fun times there. And it was also interesting because it went from my job being inside the platform trying to fix things to my job being to yell at the platforms for not fixing things and yelling at them when they're not taking down, accounts that are impersonating state parties and all that fun stuff. Left the DNC at the end of 2020 and was taking a little bit of time off to think about what is the next big thing. And one of the ideas that had still stuck with me after leaving Facebook, when I left Facebook, I was like, this problem space is fascinating, but it's much bigger than any one company. It's much bigger than Facebook. It's much bigger than Instagram. It's a whole internet problem. And so what we need is people thinking about it at the internet level. And like the one little nugget that stuck in my head was like, what would an open source integrity team look like? How do we do what we're doing on the inside, but publicly? And so with that idea in my head, got introduced to Sahar, who was trying to gather up people from Facebook.
I guess that's my cue. Thank you, Jeff. So here's my parallel hero's journey. In the beginning, there was chaos, and God made order, and He made chaos. And then fast forward a lot, and my parents are from Iran. Both sides of my family, Jews in Iran, and they both fled during the revolution to Israel, the one country that would take them. And there's a whole story there. They had me. Well, they met. They grew up. They had me, and then during the Gulf War, that caused a lot of violence in the Middle East as well, and they eventually left to the U.S. in a more sedate way. And that was part of my family's story growing up. And so while I wasn't really interested in, a lot of politics when I was a kid, I really did care about the news. And the way I put it was, you may not care about the news, but the news still cares about you. And that was part of me. Also, I really like computers. They're really fun. They were more fun in the 90s, honestly, but it's just kind of like magic. And so I, growing up, had this tension between being a computer boy and trying to make the news better, in the sense of, changing my surroundings to be better. And I had this keen sense of civilization in sort of the best sense of the word. It takes effort, and you have to keep trying to support it and advance it, or it will regress. Had a lot of adventures trying to make that happen. I tried social movement organizations. I tried civic tech. I tried social enterprise, a lot of different fun buzzwords for different ways to do similar but different things. And eventually I ended up at Facebook. And my friend said, "Why are you at Facebook? Are you trying to take it down from within?" And I said, "No, I want a job." And I thought I was just, hopping between, civil society job, tech job, civil society job. And I worked on the growth team, which turns out to be highly relevant to this conversation. And after a while, I heard that there was a civic engagement team, and they solved the civic tech problem. The civic tech problem is, imagine you make a civic tech app or a peace app or any fun thing that you think will make society better. Who's going to use it? Probably not the people who need to use it. And the people who are using it are probably the people who need it the least. That's the civic tech problem. And the way that they solved the civic tech problem was taking civic tech features like where to vote, how to vote, when, who's running, and stuffing them inside a popular app that people were already using. And I thought that was great. And it was beautiful. And after about 6 months of being on the team, the Cambridge Analytica scandal happened, the IRA scandal happened, and we set up this whole separate organization this whole separate set of projects called Election Integrity, that turned into civic integrity, that sort of ate the team. It became my whole world. And I had to learn on the fly very quickly, along with my coworkers and a bunch of people we hired, how to do this thing called integrity, which I know goes by other names in other places, to protect elections and then societies worldwide, prevent civil wars. It's a really huge task. So I built a lot of the first data sets and the first tools and stuff like that. And it really felt like a place of exciting intellectual ferment and being surrounded by people who really cared about the mission while being embedded in a larger organization that was, other teams had other goals. And part of the challenge was not what code do we write or what do we set up. The challenge was, having written this code, I have to go to a meeting and convince someone from a different team who's not rewarded for helping me to allow me to do a thing that will hurt their top line metrics for the half and hurt their whole team. And that was very hard. And after a while, for a lot of reasons, I left, in part for love, moved to Boston. I became a Berkman Fellow, and I started talking about stuff like this. And people took the things that I said that I thought were very obvious for someone like me and treated them like they were gold, and so smart and visionary. And that was really flattering, but also a lot of responsibility, because I'm just some guy. So the difference, I think, between expertise and opinion is that expertise is when other people agree with you who have the same claim to expertise. And so Jeff's journey to the Integrity Institute, I think, emphasizes open source integrity team. For me, it was more of a think tank. And how do we, and a community organization, like how do we take people like us who've done this work and go from a bunch of opinions to some expertise? And other people had other versions of this. We all got together in early 2021 and late 2020 and said, we're going to build something here. That's a lot of me talking for a while. Back to you, Jeff.
Yeah, and so we can start detailing the Integrity Institute, right? So, one thing that was really clear after working on the inside for years is that there are a ton of people at the platform who genuinely want to get it right, who actually really do care. One of the problems is those are not always the people who have the power and influence and are making all the decisions. And so, one of the challenges that we saw was there's no organization in the open that is like for those people who are fighting the good fight on the inside and sort of represents them and is trying to advocate in a way that will empower them and help them win fights. And so, the basic idea behind the Integrity Institute is we're part professional community. So it's really just gathering up all the kinds of people who have this experience and expertise. A lot of people who are in the room, actually. It's really great.
If you're an Integrity Institute member, can you please stand up? Yes.
Got the row.
These are the people making the world better.
And then the other half of the Integrity Institute is the think tank, right? And so, we just know that there are so many organizations out there in the world. There's so many stakeholders, in the internet that need access to the people who have been on the inside and kind of know how things work in there. And so the idea is to use the think tank part of the Institute to connect, people who've done it on the inside to policymakers, to academics, to advocacy orgs, to civil society orgs, to anyone who sort of has a need for this expertise to try and build that one-stop shop to come and access it.
So this is the part of the conversation, I think, where we talk about how civil society organizations can talk to tech companies and what we've learned doing that. And also maybe why are we here? Why misinformation? Right?
Yep.
Okay. Maybe I'll riff on the second one for a bit. Misinformation is a tricky word. Someone somewhere decided that there's this term misinformation, and there's this other term disinformation, and there's this other term malinformation. And apparently we have to use that definition now. I never voted for them. It's interesting how language works and how power works. And I just like the term hoaxes, frankly. But there's a question of why do we care? And also, like many things, I think terms become objects of contestation. And as soon as a term has meaning and power, people try and claim that term for their own. So some people will say, things I don't like that are normal politics is misinformation. Other people will say, anytime anyone talks about misinformation, they're talking about things they don't like. And then we're in this morass. It's really sad. I don't know if you've been experiencing this. And so one of the things that I think we try and bring to the table, and a thing that I personally believe in, is moving away from the sense of content and understanding specifically, is this true? Is this not true? What is truth? To structure, spam, virality, how are systems set up? What do they incentivize and what do they not incentivize? How can we think about not being firefighters, putting out fires all the time, but instead being urban planners who build a good city with good sanitation and, maybe building codes? That just seems more productive, but you have to do both. And I think that part of the things that we try and do when we talk to people around the world is they'll come to us with these big philosophical questions like, what is truth? Arbiters of truth, misinformation. And then we look at them and say man, pick any definition you want. Any definition you want. Right now on platforms, misinformation does 3 times better than not misinformation. Or you can talk more about that, I guess. Just does better. And that's the problem. Integrity Institute, we haven't really explained it yet. So here's what we do. We do 3 things. We gather the community. We come up with the knowledge of that community, and we bridge from that community to the rest of the world. And as a think tank, we are pointed to civil society, like a normal think tank, policymakers, journalists, academics, NGOs, whatever. We're also pointed directly at companies, and we are a think tank to companies. And that's really interesting. I haven't seen that many examples of it. People sort of explicitly saying that's what they're trying to do in my life. And if you have examples, I'd love to hear them because we can learn from them. But I think that's sort of the theme of the show. Oh, back to you, Jeff.
Yeah, and I think like a few different important areas for us to touch on here. Example ways in which like companies actually like really need and want help, and like how sometimes there can be like a mismatch or miscommunication. Honestly, it's like a lot of like the translation problems that go between like how do we connect companies to civil society organizations. One thing that we have done for companies at the Integrity Institute, for example, is around elections, having election huddles. And the idea here is let's connect people who have experience working on election integrity teams or on election problems at companies historically to people who are dealing with it for the first time, companies that are dealing with it for the first time, or members that are doing it for the first time. And like let's create a safe space where people at the smaller, startup company that's like, hey, it turns out we're really big in Brazil and we weren't even ready to be big in Brazil, but there's a lot of people there and there's an election coming and what the heck do we do? And what are some like the problems that they face of just like, we don't have anyone in the company that has expertise in Brazil. We don't know any of the organizations that have, expertise in Brazil that we should be partnering with. And obviously this raises a lot of questions about like, what does it look like to responsibly launch a platform in a company or in a country? Because it's like, does it make sense to have a whole lot, millions of users in a country if you don't have anyone there who understands the context?
Or even literally the language.
Or the language. Or moderators. But like these are situations that people who are fighting the good fight on the inside just find themselves in, right? It's like they don't necessarily own the decision of whether or not to launch in the country. That just happens, right? And they're brought in to figure out what to do about it. And so, another thing that we do is sort of try to establish best practices. So we just put out an elections best practices deck.
It was a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
Please read it. Magisterial.
Yeah. And I mean, as an example of like something like I'm genuinely proud of, it's like we have 24 different people who have worked on elections and integrity teams for companies touched that deck, right? And like have their expertise represented in that deck, which I think is something that is kind of special about the Integrity Institute, that we're able to put out something like that and also be completely independent of the platforms, right? And so there it's just sort of trying to establish like, here are the problems they face. Here's like step one to take. But we're also hoping that it's a resource for people on the outside to be like, hey, the Integrity Institute says that these are best practices. Can you please start doing some of them, right? Can you please start checking off the list? Here's one of the practices that isn't happening that we would like to see.
I see a question in the audience. And if you're going to raise your hand while Jeff is talking, it must be a burning question. So it must be good.
I think it's a great question, but you'll have to decide. So I'm Adam Ivins, National Endowment for Democracy. Great to see you guys here. Thanks for doing this. I just wanted to jump in relative to what Jeff was describing. For a lot of us who are not in the tech industry are hearing a lot about major cuts that are being made at platforms, obviously Twitter, Meta, others. So just would love any thoughts that you might be able to share on some how that might be affecting, especially teams that are working on this. My perception from outside the industry is that a lot of those cuts are happening to the civic integrity and the content moderation teams, but I don't have any data or real information to back that up. So just love your thoughts or others in the audience maybe who are experiencing this.
Raise your hand if you're working on an election, an integrity team, and then we're just laid off.
If you're personally victimized.
Part of what we talk about in the Integrity Institute is that we are not just like the Jeff and Sahar show, but really a platform for our members. And I don't know. Do you want to answer it?
We'll be talking about it at our session at 1:30, just briefly, but we have our session on building confidence.
1:30, right here, straight from the source.
Just 30 minutes. We'll be discussing that question. Yeah.
But I mean, like, to touch on it too, it's like, I think like this is a real problem. And I think like heading into 2024, I think this is something that civil society honestly needs to start worrying about, right? Because I I mean, I don't, obviously like we don't have the numbers, right? So it's like we don't know exactly like which team's been cut and what fraction of them are gone and stuff like that. But, we have our own anecdotes, right? So like we do a lot of work with European policymakers, and Meta just laid off the team that was responsible for interacting with EDMO, the European Digital Media Observatory. And, at the last EDMO meeting, they're like, yeah, we're going to see how we talk to Meta now. We don't know. That's kind of up in the air because like that team doesn't exist anymore. And I think like it is going to be a genuine concern, right? That like, hey, some of these teams have like faced pretty drastic cuts. We have elections around the world coming up. I mean, like still this year even, but like 2024 is going to be a really big year. How do we put in place all of the infrastructure that we need so we don't have the problem that is kind of like the age-old problem of platforms just showing up in a country and being like, hey, civil society org that has expertise here, how about you do all of this work for us? And we place a lot of burden on you, right? That ends up just like eating up resources from the civil society orgs. How do we do it in a way? How do we actually like build the infrastructure in a way that's like benefits everybody, and start thinking about that now?
I see your question. I'm so excited to hear it. Also, I'm just like ready for a rant. And so here goes. The way that we talk about Integrity Institute is a lot about execution and details. But also this big question about what to do, to my mind, is a question of power. I was talking to my friend Elodie Vial, who is trying to start up what she calls a crisis concierge, where if you're a journalist and you're being harassed on a platform, there's like a central third-party organization who will like be your caseworker, collect evidence for you, have channels with the social media platforms, vouch that you are a journalist, etc. If you know rich people or funders who would love that, please give her money, give us money, please. We need it. She asked me, how do I get Twitter to do this with me? Like, what is the process? And I said to her, this is a question of power. Why would they do that? They just laid off a bunch of people. The owner of Twitter doesn't seem to think this is a priority. What we are trying to do at the outset is talk about things like companies are trains of struggle, and often you need to find the right person inside the company and figure out how to help them win the internal arguments. And maybe the way you win an internal argument is by being able to cite a report by a think tank on their website about why the thing that you want to do is correct, and you are a senior person saying best practices and not a junior person making something up. That is a way to help people help our constituency, integrity workers, have more power to do the right thing. And there's a lot of that. There's a lot of just sort of like, people need knowledge, people need citations. We're happy to provide them that knowledge so that good things can happen. That's what a think tank is, and we're great at it. But there's also this question of power. And I think that in conversations about what to do with layoffs and recognizing the problem of layoffs, we can do what we can, but it has to be in partnership with other organizations who are willing to think about that and bring pressure to bear around things like, this is a vital role and you're cutting this role and will have consequences. I hope that makes sense. I hope that's useful. Person in the audience.
Hi, I'm Gus Andrews. I've been working in the civil society space around privacy, security, and access for about a decade now. Been coming to RightsCon for about a decade, working also at the Internet Living Festival, one of the things I'm really aware of is how new this mashing up of misinformation and those digital rights is. We only started, and it was about 2015 when we really started talking at the IFF about misinformation. So one of the things I'm really aware of is, my train of thought, sorry. I'm aware that on the privacy and security side, we have had all these back channel conversations for a really long time with various organizations. I know Scott and people at Media have worked on stuff about elections. So I'm wondering, I'm hearing you, I'm actually really glad that you're doing that mentorship between more mature companies and junior ones, because we're losing stuff as audiences move from Facebook and Twitter to TikTok, and suddenly it's who the hell do we know at TikTok? There. But I'm wondering, are you bringing in civil society people to do, because I know there's always been this interest since I've been doing this. Like, we've had people from Syria approaching us again, like, how do we talk to basic, how do we, and in various countries, like, saying, like, we need to create these channels. So this channels to some extent been created. I'm wondering if you bring it in added integrity as well with civil society groups.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, so like one of the metaphors that we use, right, is we need to build a bridge between the tech world and the policy world. And we're sort of trying to do that bridge building coming from the tech side, hoping to meet up. And, honestly, we found tons of people on the policy side who are like, we've been waiting for people to start building these things on the tech side. And so we've been really lucky on that front. Yes. And I mean, to be concrete, so it's like our elections best practice deck says, here are some best practices in interacting with external organizations, right? And so, we absolutely want to make sure that we get that right. And that we're telling companies to do things that will ensure that it's net positive, for the organizations on the outside. And, telling companies that like, hey, like if you found this organization useful, then congratulations, you're now a stakeholder in their future. And you need to ensure that your interaction leaves them stronger, right? So that they're still there next time you need them.
Think about paying them sometimes. They probably need it.
Yeah.
I think that's what Jeff was saying. Yes. I'll just quickly have a anecdote because I think people like anecdotes. There was a time I was working on Facebook groups and I was trying to figure out how do we think of this Facebook group as being sort of civically healthy. There are no real elections on Facebook groups, so a lot of the political science stuff that I might know off the top of my head doesn't really work. What I really wanted to do was like put up the bat signal and have, I don't know, an army of professors or nonprofits like give me thoughts on what would be a good metric to measure what a civically healthy group is. I was like, where are the people who read Hannah Arendt? Like, we need them. And I just didn't know how to do that. And I didn't know how to do that without getting fired, honestly. Part of what we're trying to do is build that channel so that people can raise their hand and say, I have a very a bounded specific question I need to answer. And I know there are people excited to help me. How do I find them? So it goes both ways.
I'm at Columbia University. Hi, let's talk.
We're neighbors. Hi. Hi. Yeah.
I'll share a brief anecdote as well if I can. So I'm Scott Hill. I'm at DAN, a technology nonprofit building tools for fact checking. And I guess, it sort of echoes the importance of building those policy tech partnerships, but also policy civil societies. I think often the civil society side, we're advocating for things, but getting the governments to come in and also advocate for them can be really powerful. And that's been my experience, at least, getting platforms to move. So say with the Brazilian elections last year, there was a real concerted effort by platform, primarily because the TSE, the sort of Supreme Court in Brazil, responsible for this, gathered them up, right? And, at one point, Telegram wasn't responding, I think it was, and they said, oh, well, we're going to block them. And they're like, oh, we missed it, it was in our spam. We'll show up, we'll play ball, right? And so I think, I don't know, and I want to also think about, the tech policy partnerships, but what about the civil society policy partnerships as well, and how can we work together to achieve more?
Yeah, I'm going to say a few little nuggets, and then I think we have 3 minutes left, and I'd love for, if anyone has questions, comments, we can do a lightning round. In fact, let's start with that. Does anyone else have a thing they want to raise their hand for? Great, it's more me. Feel free to change your mind. Yes.
Are you also going to TrustCon, doing things at TrustCon?
Yes.
Because I was only just made aware of the fact that they just showed up. So there's now a conference of the security and privacy and trust and integrity and content people, which we should be paying attention to and going to. Right?
TrustCon is cool. Other person in the back.
Just a comment because I'm from Brazil and the last election was very, very, very hard situation. So I live in this and I can tell it's very difficult situation because everybody is living in fake news, so it's a very, very sensitive.
Yeah. A thing that we've noticed is that, yes.
Just to add to this, I think it's really important since Brazil has been mentioned so many times. I'm also Brazilian, also working with digital rights in the country. And just to say that I think that a specific example in Brazil, it has to be, it's not going to be that long, but thank you. No, just to say that if we're paying attention to Brazil, we really need to pay attention to Brazil because
two things happened in the country last year during the elections that are very worth mentioning. One was, yes, this regulation side and the work from the institutions, especially the Supreme Electoral Court, and how it tried to curb misinformation by working with the platforms. And yet, how misinformation didn't stop and wasn't contained in the country. But yet, like how civil society really stepped up to it, and the many organizations and different projects that are happening in the country now because of this vast spread of misinformation, the resilience that is being building up inside of the country. So I think it's really interesting case to talk about the future, and it's also decentralized from the European and North American experiences.
Yeah, I was just at a conference which Lena, I always forget how to say her name, sorry, helped run. And they asked us to, I was a speaker there, and they asked me to close out with some spicy takes. So in that spirit, being primed by you, here's some spicy takes. And Jeff, you have some more. Spicy take number one. People often come to say, oh, tech workers, they're all engineers in their mother's basements. They don't have any social skills. We just need to tell them what to do. And if only they tried this thing, it would work. Hello, we are, attractive, fancy people who have social skills and went to good schools. And many of us don't even have computer science degrees. I do. But tech isn't just engineers, and engineers aren't just introverts. And a lot of the things that people wish that we did, we tried, and maybe it didn't work. And the bridge goes both ways, right? It's us speaking to the world, us asking for help from the world speaking to us and our constituency, and the world asking for our help. Another thing that I think is really important to your civil society question is you can see in Europe, and this is my personal opinion, there's a scaffolding being set up, expecting a lot of work to happen from civil society organizations, like real work that takes server time and data science and money. I don't really see, I'm worried about civil society having the capacity to step up and do these things that are asked of it. And there's also a sense of finding the right person in, companies are not monoliths. Companies are terrains of struggle. And often the thing to do is figure out the argument or the conversation that is happening inside the company and supporting the right side and figuring out how to do that. I don't know. We're probably out of time. Last words, Jeff?
No, just Integrity Institute is here. Feel free to reach out. We want to be the hub for interacting with people who have the experience and expertise from working on the inside. Thank you.